Maria Rodriguez sat quietly in the crowded graduation ceremony hall, her hands folded neatly on her lap as she watched hundreds of young men and women in their crisp white naval uniforms. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Naval Academy auditorium, casting golden light across the sea of proud faces. She had traveled over 2,000 miles from her small hometown in Texas to be here for this moment. Her son Carlos was finally graduating from the Naval Academy after 4 long years of hard work and dedication. She remembered the day Carlos first told her about his dream of joining the Navy. He was only 16 then, a quiet boy who spent most of his time reading books about military history and watching documentaries about naval battles. Maria had been worried at first. As a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support her family, the idea of her son going into the military scared her. But when she saw the determination in his eyes, she knew she had to support his dream. The ceremony began with the traditional march of the graduating class. Maria's heart swelled with pride as she spotted Carlos among the rows of new officers. He looked so different from the shy teenager who had left home 4 years ago. Now he stood tall and confident, his shoulders straight and his eyes focused ahead. She could hardly believe that her little boy had become a naval officer. As the ceremony continued, Maria found herself thinking about all the sacrifices she had made to get Carlos to this point. She had worked extra shifts at the diner where she waitressed, saved every penny she could, and even sold her grandmother's jewelry to help pay for his academy prep courses. There were nights when she went to bed hungry, so that Carlos could have proper meals while studying for his entrance exams. The guest speaker, a decorated admiral, began talking about honor, courage, and commitment. Maria listened intently, understanding now why Carlos had been so passionate about joining the Navy. These weren't just words to him. They were values that would guide his entire life. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment knowing that she had raised a son who embodied these principles. During a brief break in the ceremony, Maria stepped outside to get some fresh air. The academy grounds were beautiful, with perfectly manicured lawns and historic buildings that spoke of tradition and excellence. She walked slowly along one of the pathways, taking in the atmosphere and trying to process the emotions she was feeling. This was the proudest day of her life, but it was also bittersweet because she knew that after today, Carlos would be stationed somewhere far away. As she stood near a memorial statue dedicated to fallen naval heroes, Maria pulled out her phone to take a picture. She wanted to capture this moment, this place where her son's new life was beginning. While adjusting her sleeve to get a better angle for the photo, the edge of her blouse shifted slightly, revealing just a small portion of a tattoo on her forearm. The tattoo was something she rarely showed to anyone. It was a simple design, but it held deep personal meaning for her. She had gotten it many years ago, during a time in her life that she preferred not to discuss with most people. It was a reminder of a different version of herself, from before Carlos was born, before she became the hard-working, single mother that everyone in her small town knew her to be. Maria quickly pulled her sleeve back down and returned to the ceremony hall. She didn't want to miss any part of Carlos's graduation. As she took her seat, she noticed that the atmosphere in the room had become even more exciting. The moment everyone had been waiting for was approaching, the actual graduation ceremony where each new officer would receive their commission and take their oath. Little did Maria know that her brief moment outside, and the small glimpse of her hidden tattoo, had been noticed by someone who would soon change the entire course of her day. Someone whose own past was connected to hers in ways she never could have imagined. The ceremony continued, but somewhere in that crowd of distinguished military personnel, wheels were turning that would soon bring Maria face to face with a chapter of her life she thought was closed forever. Commander Jake Thompson stood at the back of the graduation hall, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd as part of his security duties for the ceremony. As a Navy SEAL commander with 15 years of service, he was used to being observant and noticing details that others might miss. Today's graduation was particularly important because several of the new officers would be joining special operations units, and Jake was here to identify potential candidates for advanced training. During the break in the ceremony, Jake had stepped outside to coordinate with his security team when he noticed a woman standing by the memorial statue. She appeared to be taking photos, probably a proud parent like so many others at the graduation. But as she adjusted her position, something caught his eye that made him freeze in place. For just a brief moment, he saw the edge of a tattoo on her forearm. It wasn't the tattoo itself that shocked him, but rather the distinctive design he glimpsed. The intricate pattern of intertwined anchors and compass roses was something he recognized immediately. It was the symbol of a very exclusive and secretive unit he had been part of many years ago, during his early career in special operations. Jake's mind raced as he tried to process what he had just seen. That particular tattoo design was only given to members of an elite reconnaissance team that had operated in classified missions during the early 2000s. The team had been so secret that even most military personnel didn't know of its existence. Only 12 people had ever received that specific tattoo design, and Jake knew the identity of every single one of them. Or so he thought. The woman had disappeared back into the ceremony hall before Jake could get a closer look. He spent the remainder of the ceremony trying to spot her again in the crowd, but the auditorium was packed with hundreds of families and guests. His military training had taught him to trust his instincts, and his instincts were telling him that what he had seen was impossible. Yet he couldn't shake the image from his mind. As the ceremony concluded and families began to mingle with the new graduates, Jake made his way through the crowd, still searching for the mysterious woman. He approached several families, making polite conversation while discreetly looking for any sign of the tattoo he had glimpsed earlier. His search seemed futile until he spotted a young Hispanic officer embracing an older woman who looked familiar. Jake moved closer, pretending to examine a display case nearby while he observed the reunion. The woman was clearly the officer's mother, and her pride was evident as she hugged her son and took countless photos. She was dressed conservatively in a navy blue dress and cardigan, looking every bit the humble, hard-working parent who had sacrificed everything for her child's success. But Jake's trained eye noticed something others would miss. The way she carried herself, despite her modest appearance, showed traces of military bearing. Her posture, the way she scanned her surroundings, even her choice of position in the room, everything suggested someone with tactical training. Yet according to his knowledge, no women had ever been part of the classified unit whose tattoo he thought he had seen. As Jake continued to observe, he overheard the young officer introducing his mother to his classmates. "This is my mom, Maria Rodriguez," the young man said proudly. "She's the strongest person I know. She raised me all by herself and worked 2 jobs to put me through academy prep." Maria Rodriguez. Jake filed the name away in his memory, but it meant nothing to him. None of the members of his former unit had been named Rodriguez, and certainly none had been women, yet the tattoo he had seen was unmistakable. Either his eyes had deceived him, which was unlikely given his training, or there was something about the history of his former unit that he didn't know. Jake decided to approach the small group. Using his natural charisma and his impressive uniform adorned with various medals and commendations, he struck up a conversation with the new graduate and his mother. Carlos Rodriguez, the new officer, was clearly honored to meet such a distinguished SEAL commander, and he eagerly introduced his mother. "Commander Thompson, I'd like you to meet my mother, Maria Rodriguez," Carlos said with obvious pride. "Mom, Commander Thompson is a Navy SEAL. Can you believe I'm actually meeting someone like him at my graduation?" Maria shook Jake's hand politely, but he noticed something in her eyes, a flicker of recognition that was quickly masked. Her handshake was firm, more so than most civilians, and her eye contact was direct and confident. These were small details, but for someone with Jake's training, they painted a picture of someone with military experience. The conversation continued pleasantly for several minutes, with Jake asking Carlos about his plans and commending Maria on raising such an exemplary son. But throughout the interaction, Jake's attention kept drifting to Maria's covered arms, wondering if he would get another glimpse of the tattoo that had captured his attention. He needed to know for certain what he had seen, because if his suspicions were correct, it would mean that everything he thought he knew about his former unit's history was incomplete. The reception following the graduation ceremony was held in a large tent on the academy grounds. Maria found herself surrounded by other proud families, all celebrating their children's achievements. She felt somewhat out of place among the well-dressed parents who seemed to know exactly what to say and do at such formal military events. Her simple dress and borrowed shoes were clean and presentable, but she couldn't help feeling like an outsider in this world of military tradition and ceremony. Carlos was busy mingling with his classmates and their families, introducing Maria whenever possible. She could see how happy and proud he was, not just of his own achievement but of having her there to share in his moment. Every time he looked at her, his smile grew wider, and she felt her heart swell with love for the man her little boy had become. Commander Thompson appeared again during the reception, seeming to move effortlessly through the crowd. Maria noticed that other officers and families treated him with great respect, stepping aside slightly when he passed and nodding deferentially when he spoke to them. She could tell that he was someone important in the Navy hierarchy, someone whose presence commanded attention and admiration. When Jake approached their group again, he brought with him another officer, a captain who had served as one of Carlos's instructors. The conversation turned to Carlos's future assignment and his potential for advanced training. Maria listened proudly as the captain praised her son's academic performance and leadership qualities, mentioning that Carlos had caught the attention of several specialized units. During this conversation, the afternoon heat became quite intense under the tent. Maria felt perspiration beginning to form on her forehead and arms. Without thinking, she rolled up her sleeves slightly to cool down, a natural reaction to the warm weather. The movement was casual and innocent, but it revealed more of her forearm than she had intended. Jake's attention immediately focused on her arm. There it was again, the distinctive tattoo that had caught his eye earlier. This time he could see it more clearly, and his suspicions were confirmed. The intricate design of intertwined anchors and compass roses was exactly what he remembered, down to the smallest detail, but there was something else that made his blood run cold. Additional elements of the tattoo that he hadn't been able to see before. Surrounding the main design were small, numerical codes that Jake recognized as mission, identifiers from operations he had personally participated in. The numbers 0347, 1205, and 0829 were etched in tiny script around the main design. These weren't random numbers. They were the operational codes for 3 highly classified missions that his unit had undertaken in Afghanistan and Iraq between 2003 and 2005. Jake felt his world shift slightly. Those mission codes were known only to the members of his team and their immediate commanding officers. They had never been written down in any official reports and were never discussed outside of their secure briefing rooms. The fact that this woman, this seemingly ordinary mother from Texas, had those codes permanently etched on her skin meant only one thing: she had been there. But that was impossible. Jake knew every member of his unit. They had trained together, fought together, and trusted each other with their lives. He could recite the name, rank, and biography of every single person who had served with them. There had been no Maria Rodriguez. There had been no women at all in their unit. The military policies of that time period didn't allow for women in frontline special operations roles. As these thoughts raced through Jake's mind, Maria seemed to sense his intense scrutiny. She looked down at her exposed forearm and quickly pulled her sleeve back down, her face flushing slightly with embarrassment. She muttered something about the heat and excused herself to find some water. Jake watched her walk away, noting again the controlled, purposeful way she moved through the crowd. Her spatial awareness was excellent. She navigated between people and obstacles without appearing to look, a skill that only came from extensive tactical training. Her peripheral vision seemed unusually sharp, and she positioned herself near exits and clear pathways, behaviors that suggested someone with security or military background. Carlos noticed his mother's departure and started to follow her, but Jake gently suggested that he stay to discuss some opportunities for advanced training. The young officer's eyes lit up with interest, and he remained behind while his mother walked toward the refreshment area alone. This gave Jake the opportunity he needed. He had to talk to Maria Rodriguez privately and find out the truth about her tattoo and her connection to his former unit. The mystery was eating at him, and his military training demanded that he investigate any potential security breach or classified information leak. But more than that, his personal curiosity was overwhelming. If Maria had truly been part of his unit's operations, then there were pieces of his own military history that he didn't understand. As he excused himself from the group and began following Maria toward the refreshment tent, Jake's mind was already formulating questions. He needed answers, but he also knew that he had to be careful. If Maria Rodriguez truly had been involved in classified operations, then approaching her directly about it could create problems for both of them. He would have to find a way to confirm his suspicions without revealing too much about what he knew or suspected. The late afternoon, sun was beginning to cast long shadows across the academy grounds as Jake prepared to have a conversation that might change everything he thought he knew about his own military past. Maria stood by the refreshment table, sipping from a cup of ice water and trying to calm her nerves. She had noticed Commander Thompson's intense scrutiny of her tattoo, and it made her extremely uncomfortable. For 20 years, she had kept her past buried, building a completely new life as a single mother in small-town Texas. The tattoo was her only physical reminder of a time when she had been someone entirely different. She glanced around the reception tent, making sure Carlos was still engaged in conversation with the other officers. He looked so happy and animated, discussing his future in the Navy with people who could help shape his career. Maria didn't want anything from her past to interfere with his bright future. She had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let old secrets derail his dreams now. When she saw Commander Thompson approaching her, Maria considered simply walking away. But her years of training had taught her that running from a problem usually made it worse. Instead, she stood her ground and prepared herself for whatever questions might come. She had practiced her cover story so many times over the years that it had become second nature. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Jake said as he reached the refreshment area, his voice carefully neutral. "Beautiful ceremony today. You must be incredibly proud of Carlos." "I am," Maria replied simply, keeping her tone pleasant but guarded. "He's worked very hard to get here." Jake nodded, studying her face for any tells or reactions. It's not easy raising a child alone, especially one with such high ambitions. Military families understand sacrifice, but civilian families often struggle with the demands of military life. Maria felt the subtle probing in his words. He was fishing for information about her background, trying to determine if she had military experience. "Carlos always knew what he wanted," she said carefully. "I just tried to support his dreams as best I could." "Have you ever been around military environments before?" Jake asked more directly. "You seem very comfortable here, more than most civilian parents at their first military ceremony." Maria's heart rate increased slightly, but her expression remained calm. "I've watched a lot of military movies with Carlos over the years," she said with a slight smile. "He's been preparing me for this day for a long time." Jake wasn't satisfied with her evasive answers. He had spent too many years interrogating suspects and gathering intelligence to be fooled by standard deflection techniques. Maria Rodriguez was clearly hiding something, and her body language suggested military training despite her claims of being a civilian. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Jake said, lowering his voice and stepping closer. "I couldn't help but notice your tattoo earlier. It's quite distinctive. The design reminds me of something I've seen before." Maria's hand instinctively moved to cover her sleeve, even though the tattoo was already hidden. This involuntary reaction told Jake everything he needed to know about her level of discomfort with the subject. "It's just something I got when I was young and foolish," Maria said dismissively. "I prefer to keep it covered now. Not very appropriate for a respectable mother, you know." But Jake was persistent. His entire career had been built on uncovering hidden truths and solving puzzles that others couldn't crack. "The anchor and compass rose design is quite specific. I've seen similar tattoos in certain military circles." Very exclusive circles, Maria felt trapped. She could see in Commander Thompson's eyes that he knew more than he was letting on. His questions weren't random curiosity. They were targeted inquiries based on specific knowledge. She had two choices: continue lying and risk exposing herself further, or find a way to deflect without revealing the truth. "Commander Thompson," she said, matching his serious tone, "I appreciate your interest in my tattoo, but I'm sure you understand that some things are better left in the past. Today is about Carlos and his future, not about old stories that don't matter anymore." Jake recognized the diplomatic non-answer for what it was: confirmation that there were indeed secrets being kept. Her use of formal military courtesy in addressing him also suggested familiarity with military protocol. Everything about Maria Rodriguez was pointing toward a hidden military background. "Of course," Jake said, backing off slightly. "I certainly don't want to make you uncomfortable. It's just that I have a good memory for faces and symbols, and sometimes I think I recognize things from my own service." Maria seized on this opening to turn the conversation away from herself. "You must have had quite an interesting career to reach your rank. Carlos mentioned you're a SEAL. He's always been fascinated by special operations." Jake allowed the subject change, but he wasn't giving up on his investigation. Special operations can be very demanding, both physically and mentally. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of work. It requires a special type of person with very specific skills and background. The way he emphasized certain words made Maria realize that he was still probing, still trying to get her to reveal information about her past. She decided that the safest course of action was to end this conversation as quickly as possible. "I should probably get back to Carlos," she said, setting down her water cup. "I don't want to miss any part of his special day." As Maria started to walk away, Jake made one final attempt to get the confirmation he needed. "Mrs. Rodriguez," he called after her. "If you ever want to talk about old times or if you have any questions about Carlos's career path, I'm usually stationed at Norfolk. We take care of our own in the Navy." Maria paused for just a moment at his words. The phrase "we take care of our own" was specific language used within certain military communities. It was both an offer of help and a subtle acknowledgement that he suspected she was part of that community. Without turning around, she gave a slight nod before continuing back toward the main group. Jake watched her go, more convinced than ever that Maria Rodriguez was hiding a significant military past. Her reactions, her body language, and her careful word choices all pointed toward someone with extensive training and experience. The tattoo was just the beginning of the mystery. Now he had to decide what to do with his suspicions and how far he was willing to go to uncover the truth. That evening, Jake returned to his temporary quarters on the naval base, his mind still churning with questions about Maria Rodriguez. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something important during their conversation. Her careful responses and military bearing suggested extensive training, but the timeline didn't make sense with what he knew about women in special operations during the early 2000s. Unable to sleep, Jake decided to do something that went against his better judgment. He accessed the classified military database using his security clearance and began searching for any records related to Maria Rodriguez. His search came up empty, which wasn't surprising since she claimed to be a civilian. But Jake had learned over the years that sometimes the most important information was hidden in the gaps and inconsistencies of official records. He then began searching for any classified operations that might have involved civilian contractors or foreign nationals during the same time period as the mission codes he had seen on Maria's tattoo. This was more difficult territory, as it required accessing files that were still heavily classified even after 20 years. Meanwhile, back at her hotel, Maria was having her own sleepless night. She sat by the window overlooking the harbor, watching ships come and go in the darkness. Her phone showed several missed calls from Carlos, who was probably celebrating with his classmates somewhere on the base. She was happy that he was enjoying his graduation day, but she couldn't stop worrying about her encounter with Commander Thompson. For 2 decades, Maria had lived with the knowledge that her former life could potentially surface at any time. She had always known that someone might recognize her tattoo or remember her from her previous identity, but she had hoped that enough time had passed and that her transformation had been complete enough to avoid detection. The truth was far more complicated than anyone could have guessed. Maria Rodriguez hadn't always been Maria Rodriguez. 23 years ago, she had been someone else entirely. Someone with a different name, a different background, and a very different set of skills. Her involvement in Jake's Special Operations Unit hadn't been as an American military member, but as something much more complex and dangerous. In 2003, during the height of operations in Iraq, the military had sometimes employed local assets and interpreters who possessed unique skills and knowledge. Maria had been part of a very classified program that embedded specially trained foreign nationals with American special operations teams. Her role had been so sensitive and her true identity so well protected that even the team members she worked with didn't know her real name or background. She had been recruited because of her language skills, her knowledge of Middle Eastern culture, and her ability to blend into local populations in ways that American soldiers never could. The program had been so secretive that official records of her participation were buried in compartmentalized files that required the highest levels of security clearance to access. During those dangerous months, Maria had risked her life alongside Jake's unit on multiple missions. She had saved American lives, gathered crucial intelligence, and demonstrated loyalty and courage that had earned her the respect of every team member she worked with. The tattoo had been given to her as a mark of honor and acceptance into their brotherhood, even though none of them knew her true identity. But the program had ended abruptly when political pressures and changing military policies made such arrangements impossible to continue. Maria had been given a new identity, relocated to the United States, and granted citizenship in recognition of her service and the ongoing danger she faced from enemy forces who might seek revenge against her. The woman Jake knew from those missions had been called Elena, and she had been presented to the team as a specialized interpreter and cultural advisor. Her background story had been carefully constructed to protect her real identity and her family back home. Even her appearance had been different then. She had kept her hair short and dark, wore practical military-style clothing, and carried herself with the confidence of someone trained in combat operations. Now, as Maria Rodriguez, she had deliberately transformed herself into someone completely different. She had let her hair grow long, changed her style of dress, gained some weight to alter her facial structure, and most importantly, had adopted the mannerisms and behavior patterns of a typical American civilian mother. The transformation had been so complete that even she sometimes forgot about the person she used to be. As dawn approached, Maria made a decision. She couldn't keep running from her past forever, and Commander Thompson's suspicious behavior suggested that he wouldn't simply let the matter drop. If she was going to protect Carlos's future and her own carefully constructed life, she needed to take control of the situation. She picked up her phone and dialed the number that Carlos had given her for Commander Thompson's temporary quarters. The phone rang several times before a groggy voice answered. "Commander Thompson, this is Maria Rodriguez. I think we need to have a conversation." A real conversation this time. Jake was instantly alert, recognizing the shift in her tone. The careful, polite manner she had maintained during their previous interactions was gone, replaced by something more direct and authoritative. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I was hoping you might call." "Not Mrs. Rodriguez," Maria said quietly. "At least not for the purposes of this conversation. I think you knew someone called Elena many years ago in Iraq, someone who worked with your unit on missions that officially never happened." Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. Elena. He remembered Elena. Well, the mysterious interpreter who had appeared for their most dangerous missions, who had demonstrated incredible courage under fire, and who had disappeared as suddenly as she had arrived. He had always wondered what had happened to her. "Elena," he said softly, the name bringing back a flood of memories. "I remember. But Elena was me," Maria interrupted. "And now we really do need to talk." The next morning, Jake and Maria met at a quiet coffee shop near the naval base. The early morning hours meant they would have privacy to discuss matters that had been classified for over 20 years. Maria arrived first, choosing a corner table where she could observe the entrance and exits, old habits that would probably never completely fade. When Jake entered the coffee shop, he almost didn't recognize her at first. Knowing who she really was had changed his perception completely. Now he could see traces of the courageous woman who had fought alongside his unit in some of the most dangerous missions of their military careers. The humble, quiet mother he had met at graduation had been a carefully constructed persona, but underneath was someone he remembered with great respect and admiration. "Elena," he said as he sat down across from her, using her operational name for the first time in decades. "Maria," she corrected gently. "Elena died a long time ago, Jake. Maria Rodriguez is who I am now, and that's who I need to remain." Jake nodded, understanding the importance of her request. "I have so many questions. When you disappeared after the Fallujah mission, we thought something had happened to you. Command never told us anything about where you went or why you left." Maria smiled sadly. The program was being shut down. Political pressures back in Washington made it impossible to continue using foreign nationals in embedded roles. There were concerns about security leaks and diplomatic complications. Those of us who had served were given new identities and relocated for our own protection. "But why the United States? And how did you end up in Texas with a son?" Maria's expression became more guarded. "The relocation was part of my compensation for services rendered. The U.S. government felt responsible for protecting those of us who had risked our lives for American interests. As for Carlos," she paused, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. "I was pregnant when the program ended. His father was killed in a bombing 3 months before Carlos was born. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Was his father? An American soldier, yes. Someone I met during my service. Someone who never knew about Carlos because he died before I could tell him. Maria's voice carried years of pain and carefully buried grief. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Maria explaining how she had built her new life from nothing. The government had provided her with basic identity documents and a small settlement, but everything else, her job, her home, her integration into American society, she had accomplished on her own. Raising Carlos while keeping her true past secret had been the greatest challenge of her life. Does Carlos know anything about your real background? Jake asked. Nothing. As far as he knows, I'm just his mother who worked hard to give him opportunities. He thinks his father was a construction worker who died in an accident before he was born. I've never told him anything about the military or my service. Jake could see the weight of those secrets in Maria's eyes. Living with such a fundamental lie about her identity and her son's heritage had clearly taken its toll over the years. You know, Jake said thoughtfully, Carlos is going to have an exceptional military career. His academic performance at the academy was outstanding, and several special operations units have already expressed interest in him. He has leadership qualities that can't be taught. Maria's face lit up with pride, but Jake noticed a flicker of concern as well. I've always worried that he might have inherited more than just my determination, Maria admitted. Sometimes I see something in his eyes, a kind of intensity and focus that reminds me of the person I used to be. I've tried to give him a normal life, but maybe some things can't be hidden forever. Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. Maria, what you did for our unit, for our country, was extraordinary. You saved American lives and risked everything to serve alongside us. Carlos should be proud to know about your service, not kept in the dark about it. And risk everything I've built? Risk his future? What if someone decides that my past makes him a security risk? Jake understood her fears, but he also knew something that Maria didn't. The world has changed a lot since 2005. Women now serve in special operations roles openly. Your background wouldn't be seen as a liability anymore. It would be seen as an asset. And Carlos has already been flagged for potential special operations training. His psychological profiles and aptitude tests suggest he has exactly the kind of skills and temperament that units like mine are looking for. Maria absorbed this information, torn between her desire to protect her son and her recognition that he was following a path remarkably similar to her own. There's something else, Jake continued. I've been authorized to make you an offer. The Navy is developing new programs that could benefit from consultants with your unique background and experience. Nothing that would compromise your current identity, but ways for you to contribute again if you're interested. For the first time since their conversation began, Maria looked truly surprised. After all these years, Elena's service record may have been classified, but it wasn't forgotten. There are people in positions of authority who remember what you accomplished. Your expertise in cultural integration, language skills, and field operations experience could be valuable in training the next generation of special operations personnel. Maria sat quietly for several minutes, processing everything Jake had told her. The life she had built as Maria Rodriguez was safe and comfortable, but it had also been somewhat lonely. She had never been able to share her true accomplishments with anyone, or find work that fully utilized her abilities. I need time to think about this, she finally said. Carlos's career has to come first. I won't do anything that might jeopardize his future. Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Take all the time you need. But Maria, you should know that Carlos is already destined for great things in the Navy. His potential isn't dependent on hiding your past. It's enhanced by the example you've set for him. As they prepared to leave the coffee shop, Jake had one final question. Do you ever miss it? The missions, the teamwork, the sense of purpose? Maria's smile was wistful. Every single day. But watching Carlos graduate yesterday, seeing him begin his own service to this country, that gives me a different kind of purpose. Maybe it's time to stop hiding from who I used to be and start figuring out who I can become. 3 months later, Maria Rodriguez received her first consulting contract with the Naval Special Warfare Development Group. And 6 months after that, She finally told Carlos the truth about his heritage and her own remarkable service to their adopted country. As Jake had predicted, Carlos wasn't troubled by the revelations. He was inspired by them, and they only strengthened his determination to honor both his parents' legacy of service and sacrifice.